Welcome to Litteraturhuset. My name is Trine Angelsgaard. I'm head of the China Committee at Norwegian PEN, and we are very excited to have Murong Xuecun with us here today. And you will be presenting your work, your latest book on Wuhan, the Deadly Quiet City, True Stories from Wuhan. About censorship in China, and also some current work on Taiwan. With his writing, Murong Xuecun has been able to tell stories so many other people in China have not been able to tell themselves and share. And China, as we know, has been rated several times one of the least free countries in the world when it comes to freedom of speech. But with his writing, Murong Xuecun your writing has come at a price because you've had to flee the country yourself, your home country. And I believe when you left, you said you were going on a conference in London, but with no plans or hope to return. So our agenda for this evening, Murong Xuecun, I will soon welcome you to the stage, and you will hold a lecture and talking and sharing your work and sharing your thoughts, and then following my co-members, PEN members, Inger Bensrud and Harald Bøckmann will join you up on stage, and we'll have a few follow-up questions back and forth. And then lastly, we will open the floor for questions from the audience. Then we will put this microphone over here, and you can come up and ask a few questions. And then I think that will be it. So without further ado, please welcome Murong Xuecun.
Thank you for your encouragement. As Trina said, I'm a writer from China, and I'm here to mostly talk about my new book, Deadly Quiet City and Stories from Wuhan. All the stories in the book took place in a city that was locked down by Chinese President Xi Jinping in January 2020. And leaving 11 million people to suffer for 76 days. I write about their torment, their struggle, and their resistance that was doomed to fail. As some of you, I guess all of you know, such a book could not be published in my homeland. So I'm so delighted to be here today to share with you the stories in my book. 2 years ago today, I was in Wuhan, exploring and interviewing. At the time, I didn't think I would be standing here. And I didn't think this book would be published. At the time, I was thinking more about being arrested. Since Xi Jinping came to power, the situation in China has become worse and worse every day. 40 of my friends have been arrested. They are lawyers, journalists, professors. They are all good people. But they have become enemies of the state simply because they have said or done something the government doesn't like. Someone might ask, how is the feeling, how is it like to live in China? I can tell you one thing. Until a few years ago, we didn't mention Xi Jinping's name much, even in private gatherings. We used this gesture, thumb up and with the right hand in place of his name. It was like, that's a private party. One man said, he wants to be the emperor for life. And the rest of us were, yeah, he does. And then one man might have said, does he know how many people hate him? The rest of us were, no, he doesn't, like this. And now, the situation is even worse, with few people daring to give interviews to the Western media. Any articles or statements that critical of the Chinese government or the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, would carry terrible penalties. Just recently, two friends of mine, Dr. Xu Zhiyong, the human rights activist, and Ding Jiaxi, the human rights lawyer, were sentenced to 14 years and 12 years in prison. And the reason is just that they talked about the situation in China in a private party in Xiamen. There is an old Chinese saying, 万马齐喑. Some of you might know 万马齐喑. It means that no one dares to say anything, or no one dares to make any noise. And what I can say is today's China is a 万马齐喑 country under Xi Jinping's control. Like my friends, I often publish the articles critical of the Chinese government in the international media. And those articles have caused me a great deal of trouble. Now, back to 12 years ago, and that time I was here. I went here 12 years ago. Back to that time, I'm a bestseller author in China. And my book have published 8 books, and they are also adapted into movies, films, and TV series, and many kinds of stage play. So at the time, I live a quite good life. But since these articles, critical of Chinese government, were published, my life has changed a lot. All my books are now banned in China. I was often harassed, threatened, and sometimes put under house arrest by the secret police. I even suspected them of stealing. In the fall of 2017, a first edition of my treasured copy of George Orwell's 1984 disappeared. And it's likely they took it. I was very upset, but still, I hope that gentleman who took the book could read it. It is a great book, right? And hopefully, he will learn something from it. Shortly before the COVID epidemic, late one night in October 2019, 2 police officers rudely took me into a police station. The reason was I have retweeted two political cartoons about Xi Jinping 3 years earlier. In my country, such things are serious crime. So the police ordered me to delete the old tweets. They also demanded I to promise never publish such content in the future. It was a long, unpleasant night. But for me, and for my friends, for the Chinese dissidents like me, such long, unpleasant nights are our daily life. A few months later, the epidemic began, For 2 months, I, like all terrified Chinese, hardly ever left my house. One day, I finally went out and was frightened by what I saw. There was not a single person or car on the wide street. You all know how wide the Beijing streets are, right? But there was not a single person or car on it. The whole city was like a ghost town. I have lived in Beijing for more than 10 years, but I have never seen such a scene before. I couldn't help wondering what kind of life people were living in Wuhan, a city under lockdown, thousands of miles away. It was at the time Clive Hamilton, an Australian professor, called and suggested I go to Wuhan to explore and interview, and then to write a book to tell the world what was really happening there. To this day, I'm so grateful for Clive's phone call, and it helped me see the way forward and changed my life, and ultimately brought me here. I secretly went into Wuhan and began my interviews. During those times, my biggest concern was not the virus, but our government. Several citizen journalists have entered the city before me, reporting on the tragic situation of dead bodies piling up, criticizing the inhumane epidemic prevention policy. But it didn't take long for them to disappear one by one, like Feng Bin, who risked his life to enter a hospital, photographing the dead bodies and making so many brave remarks, and then he disappeared. From February 2020 to this day, for more than 3 years, no one knew where he was, what he experienced, or even whether he's dead or alive. During that time, I often thought what happened to Feng Bin would probably happen to me, because we were doing the same thing. I felt fear all the time. I always suspected that I was being watched, followed, and bugged. And that fear was not unique to just me. In my book, Yang Min, her daughter died of COVID during the lockdown. When I interviewed her, Yang Min often looked up uneasily, like this, and asked me, "Is this room bugged?" To be honest, I really didn't know. All I could do was to be as careful as possible. I used the most secure communication apps I could find. I never talked about my work on the phone. When I left my room, I stuck a small piece of paper in the doorway so that I would know if someone had come. I passed the materials to my friend outside Wuhan after every interview, and then deleted it from my own computer to make sure that my computer was clean and legal. As I now know, those precautions were not enough, not even close. You all know that China has 1.3 billion people. But did you know there are more than 600 million cameras? 600 million cameras. It's about 2% have one camera in China. I could barely hide my whereabouts, and everywhere I went, there was a government surveillance device recording my every move. By then, our government has begun its rule by QR codes. Whether it was a car ride, a meal, a trip to the supermarket, I had to scan the QR code and report my trip to the government. I was sure that the secret police knew what I was doing all along. Just a month after I arrived in Wuhan, I received this mysterious phone call from a man with a Beijing accent. He asked, "What are you doing in Wuhan?" I didn't know this man, but I knew how the game is played. So I cautiously replied, "I'm just looking about for no particular reason." And the man, they said, "Then you'd better be very careful. You don't want to get infected, because that wouldn't be good." It's difficult to describe how I felt at the time. On the surface, this phone call was nothing special, just like a normal conversation between two friends. But such an ordinary conversation deeply scared me. The secret police were telling me this: "Don't play dumb. We know where you are, and we know what you are doing." I barely slept that night, thinking about that phone call and feeling like they were going to come and take me away. I often told my friends that I was ready for such a situation. I had written a statement for my imprisonment. I signed many attorney letters. Because most of my lawyers have been arrested before me. So I have to sign so many attorney letters. I thought I was ready, but the truth is, no one can really prepare for such things. The police and the courts, and for the life in China's dark prison. I worked intensely for a few more days and then fled Wuhan. I didn't go back to my place in Beijing because there are too many watchful eyes. And I knew that the secret police wouldn't allow me to finish this book. So I went to Sichuan, a mountainous province in southwestern China. Just 2 weeks later, one of the characters in this book, the brave citizen journalist Zhang Jia, was arrested. She stayed in Wuhan for over 100 days, published many articles and video interviews, and then she was arrested and sentenced to 4 years in prison. But she didn't give in. She kept protesting her unjust trial by going on a hunger strike. This hunger strike almost destroyed her health. And her brother said she probably wouldn't make it. Let's hope that Zhang Zhang will last until the time of her release. During those times, I often felt that I was not a writer. When I hid in the mountains and write the book, the secret police called several times and asked, "What are you doing now?" I answered each time, "I'm writing a science fiction novel." I sometimes tell them the stories about my science fiction novel. And that was almost true. And Therefore, I often thought that I was not a writer, but a criminal, trying to stay hidden. You see, I hid in the mountains. I had little contact with the people. I used the secure apps. Each chapter after I wrote, I sent it to my friend, and then deleted them from my own computer. After the last word was sent, I felt like a great weight has been lifted. For a while, I even thought, okay, now it's the time to be arrested. Because after all, I have finished this book, and the world will know what Wuhan people have gone through during those painful days. I sent the last chapter to my friend and left this message. No matter what happens to me, this book must be published. And thank my friend. She answered this, understood. When I walked into Wuhan, not everyone was willing to be infected, especially the doctors and nurses that had seen so many dead bodies. A friend introduced me to a doctor. This doctor has been affected during that long spring, yet kept working in the hospital. I was pretty sure that he had witnessed so many tragic scenes. But when I asked for an interview, he replied, I hope you can understand. It really isn't convenient. I knew exactly what he meant by inconvenient. At the time, our government issued extremely strict orders to doctors and nurses, forbidding them to give interviews to anyone. And anyone who dared to disobey would be severely punished. So I said to the doctor, I completely understand. I just hope that one day you will be able to tell me everything about your experience, your feelings, and what you saw and heard. He went silent. I hope so too, he replied softly. Someone might ask that how many people died of COVID in Wuhan during the lockdown. No, this is a real mystery. No, that is a you must lie system. Everyone has to lie to another. Like the doctors lie to the hospitals. The hospitals lie to the local governments. The local governments lie to the central government. And the central government lies to all of us. So there's no transparent numbers. And no one knows the exact death numbers, even Xi Jinping himself. But our government did give a figure of about 3,800 deaths in Wuhan during the lockdown. But even in China, even in this very city, in Wuhan, few people believed it. Now, one of the characters in this book, Lin Qingchuan, a doctor that worked in a small hospital, told me that during those 76 days, his small hospital issued 1 to 3 death certificates every day, per day. There are 372 such hospitals in Wuhan. So his estimate of that number is at least 40,000 deaths, which is 16 times of the official figure. And when I walked into Wuhan, I asked many people with the same question: where do you think the virus came from? These people, they lived in different places all around the city, and they didn't know each other. But their answer always the same. That they told me that it was the Americans who brought the virus to Wuhan. During the military games, the military games was held just shortly before the outbreak. I then asked, how did you know? No, they all laughed and asked, you didn't know, right? You didn't know. So I tell you, during the military games, the Americans stayed in the hospital close to the seafood market. And as soon as they left, the epidemic began. So you told me if it's them who did it. And this is quite amazing. They all answered their answers are exactly the same. And at the last, they added, that military games, the Americans, they did not get a single medal. And this is not true. The Americans, they did get some medals. But this thing made me thought a lot. I'm not talking about the medals. I'm talking about the exact answer they gave me. It might suggest that our government has not only the censorship and the propaganda systems, but also a secret system for spreading rumors and misinformations. And I'm always curious how the system works and how they passed the rumors from the highest level to the lowest. That's a real mystery. There are 8 stories in this book. One is about Jinfeng. She is 61 years old, worked as a cleaner in the hospital. In late January 2020, she was infected and thought her best option was to commit suicide because treatment would cost a lot and she couldn't afford it. Also, she would probably infect her husband and son. After much persuasions from her husband, she finally gave up the idea of suicide. And for the next week, this old couple, she and her husband, got up at 4 o'clock every morning and then rode bicycles. Because our government has closed all transportation links, so they have to ride bicycles to a hospital to receive treatment. Just 1 week. 1 week later, her husband, unfortunately, get infected. And the government repeatedly denied him treatment. Jinfeng tried so hard, and he tried her best. He knelt in the ground and yelling and shouting and crying. And she asked everybody to make phone call for her husband. And take a long time. And when she finally managed to got her husband into a hospital, it was too late. And the only thing she could do was to watch her dear husband die. In her humble home I heard her crying. I saw her tears. And her 40-year-old disabled son. At the end of the interview, I asked her what her plans were for the future. She replied that her only hope was to get a disability certificate for her son before her death. And she told me this, so that he would be able to live on after I die. After the book was published, I was often asked, what was the point of writing such a book? Is it worth the price you have paid? Oh, I really didn't know how to answer this question. But one thing I remember is when I started learning English, my teacher taught me an interesting sentence. This is the right thing to do. And this thing, to find people like Jin Feng, to listen to and record their stories, and then to write a book like this, is the right thing. And if I must suffer for it, if I must pay a huge price, I do it willingly. In Tensberg, I told many writers and journalists that as writers and journalists, it is sometimes our duty to take risks, especially in a police state like China, when the truth is buried, when people are forbidden to raise their voices, then someone has to step forward to find the truth, to raise their voice, even if doing so will result in arrest, torture, or possibly death in a dark prison. Someone has to step up to take on our responsibilities as writers and journalists. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the right thing to do.
Would you like to sit? Will you sit in the middle or will you sit over there?
Up here?
That's up to you.
Right.
Maybe you're interested in the book he has been talking about. Here it is. It was published by Hardy Grant in Australia.
Yes.
In half a year ago, or no, longer?
No longer, about 1 year. 1 year ago.
And can you tell us about, it will be, or has it been published in the West now, in English?
It was published in the UK, the US, and Australia, and Japan, and soon will be published in Poland.
And you can buy it on Amazon.
Yeah.
As a digital book also. So it's available. But I wanted to ask you a little bit about the concept of citizen journalists. Who are they? I mean, how do they operate and what happened to them after a while?
All right.
Maybe use the microphone.
Yeah, maybe you should.
You know, in China, there are restrictions on being a journalist. You must have a 记者证. 记者证, this thing sounds like a press card, but it's not. It's more like a license, like a drive license or license to sell alcohol. every journalist must have this, 记者证. Otherwise, you cannot be a journalist, or at least you are an illegal journalist. So, when the epidemic began, our government acted so quickly. They deleted so many informations online, and they canceled so many social media accounts, and they even arrested some people. So, for the outsiders, it's almost impossible to know what happened in Wuhan, and that's why Zhang Zhan, Fang Bin, Chen Qiushi, and Li Zehua went into Wuhan. No, but none of them had this thing, this 记者证, this license. So basically, they were illegal journalists. But people still want to show their respect. So that's why the term citizen journalist come from.
But what kind of background did they have? I know that that Zhang Zhan was a lawyer from Shanghai, and there was also a local writer called Fang Fang, who wrote a diary. What happened to them after? I know one of them was sentenced to 4 years in prison. But what happened to Fang Fang? She wrote this book that was also translated into English.
Fang Fang, I believe that she still lives in Wuhan, but it has been a while. I haven't seen that anything published by her. She is probably walked down the route that I have ever walked through, and her books. She published about 100 or maybe dozens books in China. I guess by now, maybe all his books are banned, and it's difficult to mention her name in public. And for the days to come, I guess her future will not be too great. The big brother, he never forgets and never forgives.
But the one who disappeared, Jing Bin, what kind of background did he have?
Fang Bin? You mean Fang Bin?
No, Fang Bin.
Fang Bin, as I said earlier, disappeared for almost 3 years, and that's someone said that he will be released on April 30. I don't know if this is true, but even if he's released, he would still live in a prison. But this prison, the only difference will be this prison will be a little bigger than the one he's living in now. So the only difference. And there's Li Zehua. He went to Wuhan and disappeared for about 2 months, and then has been silent for about 2 years. He left China last year and now lives in America. And there's Chen Qiushi. Chen Qiushi disappeared for more than 2 years. And now he lives in Qingdao and doing some harmless business, harmless to our government. That's them.
But the citizen journalism is a very Wuhan phenomenon. But do you think it's spreading to other places and other conflict situations in China?
No.
No? Why not?
These four, Fang Bin, Zhang Zhan, Chen Qiushi, Li Zehua, they are the last citizen journalists. Until the last day, until the day the Communist Party fails. Now the situation is so bad, no one dares to do such things. And do such things will carry terrible penalties, really, and much worse than before, even than in 2020.
So how are the government dealing with such people? I mean, some get arrested for picking trouble and yeah. But do they get very harsh sentences after a while? Has it been increasing hard sentences?
No. Back to 10 years ago, the political criminals, political criminals, they had some privileges in prison. I'm a political prisoner, so you must show me your respect. Yes, but now the situation is much worse. For example, Dr. Xu Zhiyong, he got 14 years in prison, got a sentence like this. And I'm pretty sure that when he's in prison, his colleagues, his partner in the cell, in the same house, they won't treat me well. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine, Guo Yushan, he helped the blind lawyer Chen Guangcheng to escape. And in 2014, he was arrested, not formally arrested. He was brought into a basement, dark basement, and was tortured. They used the electricity, the electricity did that thing, and to torture him for maybe 2 hours, and they forced him to take off all his clothes, naked, and he said to me like this: "You just felt that you are just like a pig, howling in the ground, and all the people are watching you. It's like this. So it's quite bad."
Mm-hmm. But how about ordinary writers in China? What can they write these days, and what can be published?
Well, if you only talk about love. Love. So your book might be published, but be careful.
Could be pornography,
No, you'd better not to mention the LGBTQ stuff.
Okay.
If you want to talk about normal life, well, it's fine. But the life has nothing to do with the government. And most writers are doing this. Like, if you want to write a book, to sing a song for the Communist Party or Xi Jinping himself, and then congratulations, you will be the next bestseller author. Yeah, like this.
But what about those, celebrity writers in China, like Mo Yan, Yan Liangke, and Yihua? Are they publishing books these days, and what kind of books do they write? What kind of fiction can they write?
Not those writers. I was very familiar with them.
You're one of them.
Yeah. I was one of them once. And now I haven't been in touch with Mo Yan for years. I really don't know what he's writing, what he's working on now. But even Mo Yan, I guess he's afraid. Mm-hmm. I can take me as an example. After all my books were burned in China, I can hardly live as a writer. Yes, I wrote some movies and TV and scripts, but none of them with my name. I also wrote a book for a restaurant.
Really? And
luckily, the secret police didn't come and stop it, because they knew, right? They knew a book for a restaurant. It's harmless, right? So for Yu Hua, for Mo Yan, and for all the rest of us, I think the situation is getting worse. You can publish a book about love or life today, but in the days to come, I don't know. I don't know for sure. You know, we have been through those Mao era, and we have been through the Cultural Revolution. How many books were published at that time?
But you, I've been reading about in your heyday, you know, when you were the big and famous in China, you were seen as a cyber trendsetter. You were actually very early on, like the Chengdu book. Is that, how are the conditions for writers to publish online, like you were a pioneer in?
Well, I published that book online in 2002. It wasn't a good time, but for some of us, it was good enough. So I can publish this novel online, and then got my book published. And by now, I guess to write such a book, probably it's a very dangerous thing. Probably it's a serious crime. Now, some online writers, we call the internet writers, have been arrested. Many of them. What they have written, it's not critical of the government or the CCP. Sometimes they just write some sexual things, and that was not allowed to.
Right. But who is the big bestseller in China today? You told me before.
Yeah.
Who is that?
And you can guess. You can guess. Okay. You can have 3 guesses. It's our president, Xi Jinping.
And how many books has he written?
He has
4 volumes, big 4 volumes.
he has more than 120 books under his name. Yeah, 120, more than that. No, I don't believe that. I believe that none of this book, or not a single word, was written by him. In the past 10 years, he published 1 book per day, per month. It's easy math, right? 120 books and 10 years. 1 month a book.
Before we move into Xi Jinping, I wonder if I can go for 1 moment back to Wuhan, because I read your book and it's really a heartbreaking document.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, now it's some years or 2, there's some time now that has elapsed after you wrote it, and you have a certain distance, I guess, to your experience. But what are your strongest experience from your Wuhan days as you see it today?
The most important thing is my fear. My fear. No, like I said earlier, I felt fear all the time. I think people in the free world could hardly experience what I feel. I was like this when I was working on the road. I was like this, to look around, and I sometimes talk with my friend on the phone. I use the carpet to cover us, and to make my voice and as low as possible, as low as possible. So that might be safer for me. And the second thing is what you said, the heartbreak feeling. Mm-hmm. When I interviewed young me, when she talked about her daughter, how he helped her daughter to come through the final days. She cried so badly. And it's the feeling that you couldn't help. You cry with her. And also, sometimes I saw people, when in May 2020, people were on the street. I met them every day, but I seldom saw their smile face. No, the whole city was covered with sadness.
But at the same time, reading your book, you really you're impressed by the people's survival skills.
Yes.
And I guess that must also have been some of your experience, that you were under such dire conditions that they were still trying to survive, simply.
All the people, Jinfeng might be the Jinfeng's family might be the poorest in the city. But I'm sure that there are many families are poorer than them. No, they lived in the city, right? In Wuhan, they could find a job, and they got some salaries. That's not bad, not bad at all. And there are many people lived in so poverty lives, and they cannot compare to Jinfeng's family. They died in silence, and nobody knows. And on December 17 last year, our government lifted all the restrictions. So many people died. I just published the article in the Guardian to tell how bad the situation is. Some scientists estimated that there were 1.2 million to 1.7 million died for COVID in about 2 months. But in the countryside, in the hamlets, what really happened there, nobody knows.
But looking back, if we are thinking of survival skills in a different sense, what do you think this experience has done to the Communist Party and to Xi Jinping himself? How about their survival skills? Have they come out stronger, with more control? Are they actually weaker because they have been faced with open resistance? How do you assess that? Are they going to survive very long? Yes? No?
What I have learned in Chinese history is that the disasters only will help the dictators. Like the Great Famine occurred in 1959 to 1962. Did Chairman Mao step down? No. And the COVID 3 years, so many tragic things happened. Did Xi Jinping's position challenged? No. Disasters can only help the dictators. Now that's what I have learned from the Chinese history. Yes, in last November, some young generations, they took to the street and they held this white paper. It's called the White Paper Revolution. And they even shouted that step down the CCP, step down Xi Jinping, the bravest the world ever after the 1989. But still, Xi Jinping's position is unchallenged. So that's the thing. I think in the days to come, our Chinese people must face a more difficult situation.
But now that you live abroad, you are able to be more outspoken about the political situation in China. So I was wondering about the Taiwan conflict. What do you think about it? What's happening really? And what's going to happen in the near future?
I have followed this topic for years. I have collected many informations online from inside China. I'm pretty sure that the war, the Great War, is coming, and it won't take long for us to wait. Xi Jinping have said many times we should go to war and we must defeat them. And this thing you can find everywhere in China. The newspapers, the TV, the online, internet, you can find it everywhere. And they are now building bunkers, many bunkers, much more than you can imagine. And they are building wartime medical stations. Every subway stations will be the wartime medical station in Fujian, in Fuzhou. Yeah. This is what is happening now. I will share my information with the clerk, Christopher. This is really scary, right? But the most scary thing, the scariest thing is in the rest of the world, many people don't believe this war will come true. A professor in the Tokyo University said this about this war. If you believe it will come true and you prepare for it, then it might not happen. But if you don't believe it, if you don't prepare for it, it will definitely happen.
I just read an interview with Foreign Minister of Taiwan, and he said that he was sure the war would, or the military conflict would start in 2027. I don't know why he said that year, but do you think it's that coming that close, or?
Xi Jinping's third term is from this year to 2027.
Oh, I see.
There's another thing too. I think that's the 100th anniversary of the foundation of the Red Army, isn't it?
Yes, 100 years. Yeah, yes.
So it adds up.
No, when I was in Beijing, I heard these rumors many times. It was said that Xi Jinping made a promise to his colleagues, to the high officials in the party, that if you give me five more years, I will take Taiwan back. This rumor, it could be true. And if he wants more terms, and maybe the fourth term, he must do something. And the most important thing is this.
Taiwan.
Yeah.
Maybe we should let the audience also. Are we doing some reshuffling here with the microphone, or people come up, or? Sure. I don't know how you organize this.
Maybe you could. So, well, I'll take this down. You can have one more question, and then I'll organize this, and then people can prepare if you have any questions.
Yeah. Just let me ask, what do you think ordinary Chinese people think about the situation in Taiwan? Are they supporting the government, or are they quietly, protesting or disagreeing?
It's really hard to say. No, under the communist propaganda and censorship, there are no transparent statistics. On the surface, you can see many little pinks. You all know little pinks, right? 小粉红. The young generation who support the communist propaganda, they shout so loud, and they will support Mr. Xi's actions. But under the surface, how many people not agree with the Mr. Xi, I don't know. But some people even yell this: we only need that island. We don't need those people. Or let us kill them all online. It's crazy, but I think it's understandable. Not the content is understandable. It's the situation and the propaganda and the censorship. People act like this. This situation is understandable. Otherwise, the propaganda system, you know.
If there are any questions in the room, open to the floor. I see a hand over here. Please come up here.
Well, thank you very much for this, both the talk and the interview part afterwards. It's scary for many of us, and I understand very much what you say about your fear when you were in Wuhan. At the same time, we know that Chinese citizens, especially, but even foreign citizens outside of China, may also have reasons to fear. Is that something you're thinking of when you are traveling in Europe, in Australia, America, wherever? The fact that there are various forms of undercover police from the Chinese government, even in other places, that can get at you. Is that something you're thinking of?
Oh, that's no, such things happened again and again, and it also happened to my friends, like Teng Biao, a professor who lives in America, and the journalist Su Yutong lives in Germany. They often received harassment or even a death threat. Even something much more disgusting. When I was traveling, my friends are always concerned that they warning me not to go through Hong Kong or Macau or even Malaysia. They were worrying. You all know that the Causeway Bay bookstore incident. 3 persons were arrested. Gui Minghai from Thailand, and Li Bo from Hong Kong, and Lin Rongji from Shenzhen. So the Chinese government, the secret police, they can really come to you, you know.
And it doesn't help to get a foreign citizenship, as Gui Minhai had. He was a Swedish citizen.
No. Even you can look at the Chen Lei, Australian journalist, or Yang Yun, and Australian scholars, intellectual. No, they are all the same, you know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'll always seize the opportunity to ask a question. It's so good to see you again, Murong, and thank you for doing this as well. When you talk about Xi Jinping being in a rush to take Taiwan, could you perhaps elaborate on that? Why is he and the rest of the CCP leadership in such a rush? Is it because of the geopolitics that they want to sort of increase their hegemony and their power in the region? Or is it emotions that they want to reunite the country again before too much time has elapsed? Or what do you think are the factors that are in play here?
You know, Chairman Mao hasn't finished his task to reunite the country, right? So that's his last will. And Xi Jinping, we often said that Xi Jinping not his father's son, but the Chairman Mao's son. but a son of Chairman Mao. What he's doing now, it's like I like to know what Chairman Mao has done before. So I guess this is the one important thing. Another thing is that I believe that rumor in Beijing said that he promised to the high officials he will take Taiwan back. I believe that is true, and that is also an important reason.
You say that the world, if the world does not prepare for war, then the war will come. But what do you think the world might do that would prevent the takeover of Taiwan from China? I mean, we see the war in Ukraine now, where you have these totally devastated cities, and it's. I think that Xi might do something like that if he had to, and the Taiwanese people probably wouldn't, accept it and bear it. And what could the world, apart from that, do? It's with Xi really mobilizing so much money and resources into the military. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. In 2019, the Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen gave a speech. He said, if there's a war, if the war is to come, I will face the first attack. And for the second, I hope the whole world stand with me, stand with us. I don't know what the West will do and what the West can do, but it's important to show our attitude to support Taiwan. And we won't. There are about 24 million people living in that free island. We human beings, we should not let that island fall. Yes.
Hi, I'm from Taiwan. So first of all, thank you very much for your great sharing about Wuhan, and thank you also for the support for Taiwan. And so many people concerned about the situation between Taiwan and China, and we are going to have a presidential president election next year. And some candidate will say it's a choice between war and peace, and some will say it's a choice between democracy and autocracy. So how do you think about that?
And the next election, I guess the KMT probably will win. Someone said this party, the KMT party, they seems want to be much friendly with Beijing, right?
They believe they can make some peace for negotiation, which a lot of people actually don't believe.
But in my opinion, Xi Jinping has his own schedule,
Agenda.
And this schedule will not change, no matter which president is in Taiwan. No matter it's Tsai Ing-wen or Ma Ying-jeou or someone else, nothing will change his schedule.
Okay, as a Taiwanese, I think most of us are willing to fight and to protect the way of living. That's important for us. Freedom of speech, those things. Yeah.
It's not an easy choice, but you have to choose. And the most important thing is, I have been in Taiwan many times, and have met many Taiwan people. I think the most important thing is, many Taiwan people don't think this is true. This war is coming, and some of them just pretend that there's no country called China in the planet. No China. They just pretend that China doesn't exist. This is more dangerous, I guess.
Yes, because I was surprised you talking about they are building a bunker in China because they are not building more in Taiwan now. Yeah, so I guess we are also prepared to the war, but maybe not so physically already building a bunker, those things. So I guess in the mentality as the Taiwanese, they should be more prepared what will come.
Yes, agreed.
Yes.
And I think with that, we will conclude this session. And thank you, Murong Xuecun. Thank you very much for coming
Kina.
and sharing your thoughts and your work, and for speaking up and speaking your mind. We thank you very much. And from Norwegian Pen, we have this a book. It's a poetry, a collection of poetry from one of our members from Turkey, and that's a token of appreciation for your contribution here today. Thank you very much. Thank you.